Fame, maybe the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday. I'm wondering, were there any unique skill sets or traits that made him especially good at what he did?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, Richard was a um, tremendous player. Had a tremendous skill set. He had great length, explosive, very quick for his size. Um, was really a could do everything. He started his career on the nose, which was not really his best position, it's but he could play it for sure. And we needed him there in '01, and then we moved him back to his natural position of 5 and 3 technique. He played some on the nose in passing situations, but he was really more of a defensive end than a nose tackle. But he played there because we needed him, and then after we got Ted and Trailer and Vince, and then he ended up outside. But again, long, athletic, very powerful. It was a tough matchup for the interior lineman. He could win with speed, and against some of the quicker guys, he could win with power. And smart player. Richard was very smart and had good awareness. He was a good situational player, and certainly helped our linebackers a lot because of uh, he was either able to get penetration or able to draw you know blockers and tie up blockers that couldn't get to the second level on some of our off the ball players. He was a very disruptive force. Good in the kicking game. Played in the punt return and had some big plays for us going back to '01, like the punt return. Troy's punt return against Cleveland. He had a huge block on that. Was an excellent field goal blocker. So he was had a lot of roles and played in a lot of different situations. Won a lot of games with him. He was a great player. Certainly deserves to be in the Patriots Hall of Fame and the NFL Hall of Fame. Hopefully that'll be coming shortly for him as well.
One quick follow up. You kind of just mentioned one play from his past, but in the past, you've identified specific performances or moments that you thought maybe were turning points for players that sort of put them on their respective paths to greatness. Just wondering, is there anything like that comes to mind for Richard Seymour?
Oh boy, there's a lot of them. Again, we won so many big games, and he made an impact when he got here in 2001, and again playing him on the center, which was it was kind of a new spot for him. He played defensive tackle at Georgia in a kind of a four-man line, really more on the guard. But he adapted that quickly, and then his role shifted a little bit. But he was so consistent for his the early part of his career when he was up with us, and through those championship years that on the defensive line, it's not really about one flash play. It's about down after down being dominant. And I just referenced the punt return play because you don't see a lot of defensive tackles on the punt return unit. But there were. I remember looking and showing our team plays of that punt return unit being Troy Brown, who was obviously a starter, Ty Law, Lawyer Malloy, Mike Vrabel, Teddy Bruschi, Seymour. And then you had some of the other guys like Larry Izzo and other players like that, Eric Alexander, and those guys that were kind of core special team players. But there was plays on our punt return team where we had 4 or 5 starters and Patriots Hall of Fame players and NFL Hall of Fame players, on punt return unit. So and Seymour was one of them. So I just those plays kind of stood out for me because they're just a little more unusual.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question, Jim McBride, followed by Andrew Callahan.
Good morning, Coach. I guess I'm sticking with the Seymour theme here, and I'm wondering about
Okay.
your memories of his fumble return recovery against the Bills, where he was able to get penetration, but then he had the athleticism, speed to run 68 yards for a touchdown.
Yeah, Richard could run. He could run. and even not on just a fumble return, but like on interception returns, Harrison and Law and Eugene Wilson, those guys, Asante. I mean, I can, he is one of those guys that could go from defense to offense in a hurry and made some big blocks and honestly caused a lot of those interceptions, or certainly some of them just because of his penetration, length, and pressure on the quarterback that were forced disruptive or errant throws. But yeah, again, he could, he was very, very athletic, and when you look at that defense at Georgia, he played with Stroud, so he was, if I remember right, he was on the right, Stroud was on the left, and I mean, you talk about two big time defensive tackles on the same defense at the same time. I mean, that Georgia defense was, I mean, the entire defense was drafted, I think from either 2000 or 99, whatever it was. It was Bailey and all those guys. But anyway, yeah, no, he had a lot of explosive plays, field goal blocks, fumble, scoop and score, strip sacks. He was really certainly a big play guy. But I think when you look at those defenses, the combination of multiple players, and he was the centerpiece of the front. But between Vrabel and McGinnis and Bruschi, and then eventually Ty Warren and Wilfork, and there was multiple players there, Jarvis Green, that if you got one guy, it was just hard to get them all. And but again, he was the centerpiece. He was the most disruptive player, and that's why he'll be in the Patriots Hall of Fame, and that's why he'll probably eventually be in the NFL Hall of Fame, hopefully this year.
Yeah.
Next question, Andrew Callahan, followed by Andy Hart.
Hey, good morning, Bill.
Andrew?
So sticking with Seymour, I wanted to go back to your first few practices with him. Obviously, you thought highly enough to take him as highly as you did in the 2001 draft. But when you first see him in pads and he's stringing some practices together, what was your impression of him then?
Yeah, again, pretty good. He's really unlike any other player that that I had coached up until that point. At the Giants, we had some good defensive linemen, Leonard Marshall, but Richard Seymour is 6'7", Leonard was 6'2". So it was just a difference in posture, length, and I was in Denver. We had Alzado. He was kind of more like the guys we had at Baltimore, John Dutton, Mike Barnes, but a combination like of Barnes and Ehrman and Dutton all rolled into one, between length, explosiveness, athleticism, quickness, and those guys were really, really good players. But there haven't been many, like him. I mean, obviously you're talking about Hall of Fame players, so it's not a long list of those guys. But I just never really had anybody like that. And he was, again, very smart. He could do a lot of different things, game plans, pass rush plans, playing certain plays a certain way. That was all really pretty easy for him, because the game came easy for him in terms of intelligence and anticipation and communication along the line with guys like Bruschi and Vrabel and McGinnis and those guys. They all communicated well. Rodney, Lawyer, if it was look for something, or they see that, they were able to apply it quickly and use it to make a play, or to take care of a problem that we could identify pre-snap. So those were big time strengths. It was really the whole package, but it jumped out pretty quickly. But it didn't take long to see it. This guy was gonna really be able to help us.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Next question, Andy Hart, followed by Chris Ryan.
Sorry to break the streak of Seymour questions here, but just wanted to follow up on something I kind of asked you the other day. How was practice this week? How did you see your team, I guess, turn the page from a tough loss?
Yeah, each week's its own week, and like it usually goes. Wednesday it's getting familiar with a new team and a different style of play. Certainly they've had a different style of play than Dallas or Houston or, you know, but again, played very well defensively. I mean, again, a good red area team, turn the ball over, you know, very aggressive front. And so, you know, getting the look from the other, you know, our scout teams and, you know, doing things properly. Same thing with their formationing on offense. They create a lot of different looks with their motion packages and so forth, and a very good scheme running team. So, you know, it's hard to replicate the way they do things when, you know, they're different than the way, you know, you do them. But as that's gone along, we've gotten, I'd say, more adjusted to it, and the pictures have been cleaner, so the execution's been cleaner, and I'd say generally speaking, that's kind of the way it goes, you know, every week. But you know, each day's gotten a little bit better. We'll clean some things up today and go through some situations, and we'll be ready to go on Sunday.
Next question, Chris Ryan, followed by Phil Kerr.
Morning, Bill. How are you?
Hey, Chris.
I want to ask you a little bit about leadership and Seymour and kind of you in that realm where just Seymour personal accountability always seemed to be a big part of his leadership style and yours, you know, as well. And where you will always mention, you know, we need to coach better as a part of your when things don't go well. How important is that personal accountability, and what was Seymour's leadership style like in your view?
Well, I remember Richard coming in, you know, as a young player, and his kind of, I think, and he verbalized this, but I'd say his philosophy is kind of, you know, I have two ears and one mouth. I'm gonna listen more than I speak, and I think that would be a good way to sum it up. He listened. He was very attentive. He took a lot of things in. When he spoke, I think everybody listened carefully to what he said because, you know, he wasn't just a chatterbox. You know, what he said was thoughtful and with a good foundation. He wasn't, you know, overly emotional about, you know, every time something happened, you know, to have something, you know, some commentary on it, good or bad. He, you know, again, he kind of took his time. He processed things, and when he spoke, I think it was with a great deal of from the listeners, his teammates, his coaches, myself, all of us. You know, it was with the you knew that he put a lot of thought into it, and you knew that it was coming from the heart and a solid foundation. He just didn't, you know, say stuff to say it. It was, you know, it was backed up by, you know, solid thinking and evidence. And so I think that type of leadership is, again, well received because it's sincere, and it's, you know, with a good, you know, good perspective. It's not just, you know, a quick thought that there was no depth to. With Richard, there was a lot of depth in I would say really everything he said and did, and so it was a very, you know, he was a really I'm very fortunate and feel honored to have had the opportunity to coach Richard, not just as a great player but as a person, and you know, like a lot of players, like a lot of us people, like all of us, you know, he had some setbacks and he had some difficult things he had to deal with along the way, and he, you know, he managed them, he fought through them and overcame them, and, you know, and had a very, very, very successful career. And again, we won a lot of games with him, and we certainly wouldn't have won as many without him. So I'm always appreciative of Richard and what he did for myself, my family, and the New England Patriots.
And on Damian Harris going into the Jets game, coming off obviously a strong game statistically against the Cowboys, where do you see him at this point, and how do you evaluate his play to date?
Yeah, well, Damian's, you know, been a very good player for us. And a lot of his production is a function of, you know, what some other people do as well. But he can only do what he can do, which is, you know, make the most out of every opportunity. But just like other skill players, some opportunities are provide more than others do. But as we've stressed with him and every player, really, it's the same thing. Is you do what you can do, you control what you can control. Every play is not an 80-yard touchdown. Some of the best runs he'll have are going to be 5-yard gains. But that's getting the most out of the play. Maybe it was a play that was blocked for 1 that he gets 5 out of. So that's, I think that's what every player needs to do. Damien's done a good job of that. And whatever role we've asked him to take on, he's embraced it and worked as hard as he possibly can to excel in it. And so he has a ton of respect from every player and coach in this organization, as he should, because he's earned that. That's not something you get from talking or some kind of a false image. You get it from day after day, consistent performance and dedication, and he's the poster boy for that. He works extremely hard and takes his job very seriously and always tries to perform at the absolute highest level and do what's best for the team. So he's earned everybody's respect for that. That's not anything that's given. He's put in the blood, the sweat, and earned it.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep, you're welcome.
And final question, Phil Perry.
Hey, Bill, we had an interesting discussion with Robert Saleh yesterday on a conference call, sort of about the cyclical nature of schemes in the league. And obviously his background is in that Seattle style defense of scheme that's become really popular over the course of the last several years in the league. And he kind of got into some of the adjustments that offenses have made to combat that scheme and how now he's seeing those offenses sort of spread across the league. And that adjustment to the adjustment has been interesting. I wanted to ask you, have you seen an adjustment to the adjustment on the other side? Meaning, that whatever that he pointed to Kyle Shanahan and, Kyle's scheme and that kind of proliferating and that being tough for these Seattle style defenses. Is there an adjustment to the adjustment that you're seeing from defenses when it comes to combating what those schemes like to do?
Well, yeah, I think it's been interesting. When you go back to, we put so much time and preparation into Seattle, in 14 and we even go back to 12 when we played them in 12 and then 14 and then, all the great success that Seattle had there and many of those coaches have gone and carried that scheme from, there's a bunch of them, and we saw one last week with Dan Quinn. But they've, I'd say they've all kind of taken on a little bit of a different variation to that. It's not, as you mentioned, have referenced, it's not the same as what it was in Seattle in 12 and 14. It's been modified, and part of that's come from the way offenses have tried to attack it and tried to, expose some of the things that, are core fundamentals of that system that you try to break them down. And I think that's similar to, what we saw from, Paul Brown to Bill Walsh with the West Coast offense, what Bill ran in the 80s and won championships with, is the foundation of a lot of offenses in the National Football League today. But yet, sometimes you have to look, and you have to look pretty closely to see, those plays. Whereas, 20 years ago, it was much more evident. I mean, the plays, the protections, like it was very common. The way multiple teams did that had come from that system, whether it be, Mike and coaches like that were, really, McCarthy and Holmgren and so forth. And then that's all been kind of modified. Certainly the running game has been modified considerably from 2-back to basically 1-back type formations. And then, which in the original West Coast offense, those were all mainly 2-back formations, right, with just a little bit of 1-back. Now it's changed. Although, as somebody mentioned earlier, Kyle, or maybe you mentioned it. Kyle has adjusted and run more two-back stuff with Juszczyk, but that's more the exception than the norm. So, the long and short answer is, yeah, I've seen the defenses adjust. I've seen the offenses adjust. And even the foundation of whether it's Pete Seattle 3 or, the Paul Brown, Bill Walsh, West Coast offense, so to speak, they look quite different. But yet, if you went into those people that did that and the organizations that did it, I'm sure they would be able to say, well, look, here's the foundation of it. Yeah, these are different than what they were, but the protections are the same, the route concepts are the same, we call it the same. It's just, looks a little bit different, and that's hard for the defense when you run similar concepts from different looks. It's hard for the defense to identify the concept when it looks differently. If you run it 4 times in the game, each one's a little different picture. It's harder to recognize than if you run the same thing 4 times and allow them to see it, correct it, see it again, anticipate it, and so that's. But I think that's pretty common. Whatever the as Coach said, whatever the trends are. If you're good at them and they're successful, teams are going to find a way to copy them or use that, and then the other side of the ball is going to find a way to try to break those down and put stress on those principles that you're trying to coach, and then eventually you're probably going to have to make some kind of adjustment. Now, in some cases when you have an extremely talented group of players, maybe make fewer adjustments. I think when your team isn't as talented as a team that's doing those things and doing them very well at a high level, then you start to see some of the exposure a little bit quicker than, when you put 11 guys out there that are, really good players and they're really experienced in the scheme. Like that's kind of a different, the highest level of any scheme. So, but I agree with Coach's comments, and I think he's right on point there. And I'm sure in 5, 6, 7 years, we'll look back and have a similar conversation about some other aspect of it.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate it. That was sort of a long-winded one for me. So thanks, Bill.
Yeah, it was another long answer, a short question on this end too. So I'll try to keep it brief.
I'm working on being more succinct.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks.
Thank you, Coach. That's it for today, guys. Thanks, everyone.
When did Bud Light Seltzer start making lemonade?
Probably when 2020 handed us all those lemons.
New Bud Light Seltzer Lemonade, packed with lemonade flavor after a lemon of a year.
Opponents? I've gone up against thousands.
And there's an opponent we're all up against, COVID-19.
But there's a way to beat it. Get vaccinated.
So when it's your turn, roll up your sleeves.
And let's get to the finish line together.
When did Bud Light Seltzer start making lemonade?
Probably when 2020 handed us all those lemons.
New Bud Light Seltzer Lemonade, packed with lemonade flavor after a lemon of a year.
Opponents? I've gone up against thousands.
And there's an opponent we're all up against, COVID-19.
But there's a way to beat it. Get vaccinated.
So when it's your turn, roll up your sleeves.
And let's get to the finish line together.